Back in March, which was like 6 generations ago, Donald Trump made a visit to the U.S. Department of Justice. Now, it's not actually a place that's typically visited by presidents, partly because the DOJ is supposed to operate independently from the presidency, even though it's part of the executive, to guarantee, or at least and try and make people think there isn't political influence from the White House. But now you know we're not living in ordinary times. Trump's visit was more ironic than it was unusual because there was a time when the DOJ was, in Trump's eyes, the heart of the deep state that was weaponized to launch witch hunts against him. But this was different. Trump was walking into a DOJ that he had already begun reshaping for his own benefit. Prosecutors who worked on the January 6th investigation had been demoted or fired. High-ranking FBI officials had been ousted. At least a dozen officials who worked on the federal criminal investigations into Donald Trump had been fired. This was Trump territory. And he was going to show everybody that it was.
We're turning the page on 4 long years of corruption, weaponization, and surrender to violent criminals, and we're restoring fair, equal, and impartial justice. But first, we must be honest about the lies and abuses that have occurred within these walls. Unfortunately, in recent years, a corrupt group of hacks and radicals within the ranks of the American government obliterated the trust and goodwill built up over generations. We will expel the rogue actors and corrupt forces from our government.
That was back in March. Things have gotten much worse since then. Trump's retribution tour seems to have ratcheted into into overdrive. He's since used the power of the presidency to target political opponents. And that includes democratically elected lawmakers, judges who aren't really his political opponents. They just rule on things, news organizations, universities, former public officials, college students, and more. And last week, his quest for retribution took a vengeful turn. On Friday, the Justice Department opened several investigations into the New York Attorney General, Letitia James. This is the same Letitia James who nailed Trump with more than $500 million in civil penalties over the Trump Organization's fraudulent business practices. There's now a grand jury looking into whether she somehow violated his civil rights or mishandled the Trump civil fraud case and a separate case involving the NRA. Separately, a so-called special attorney has been assigned to investigate mortgage fraud allegations against Letitia James. Her office responded saying they stand behind its successful litigation of the Trump Organization. And Letitia James's lawyer, Abby Lel, released a statement saying, quote, investigating the fraud case Attorney General James won against President Trump and his businesses has to be the most blatant and desperate example of this administration carrying out the president's political retribution campaign. Weaponizing the Department of Justice to try to punish an elected official for doing her job is an attack on the rule of law and a dangerous escalation by this administration, end quote. Abby Lel joins me now. He's a defense attorney and the founding member of Lowell and Associates. Abby, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me today.
Abby, the Justice Department seems to be operating under the theory that your client, the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, may have deprived President Trump of his civil rights with her civil fraud case against him. Your reaction to that?
There could be so many. You know, when I read that, you have to think that the famous author George Orwell, who wrote 1984, that coined the famous phrase of doublespeak and the state saying things opposite of what it means. His book, now, what President Trump and the people who carry out his mandate, it makes George Orwell's 1984 look like a Mother Goose nursery rhyme. I mean, it is just beyond comprehension, and we can't get inured to it, Ali. The requests to the Office of Attorney General that you mentioned to have to do the case the office brought against the NRA, found by a court and jury to have defrauded the people at the organization, or, as you pointed out, the $500 million judgment rendered against the president, his companies, or himself. Those represent the rule of law operating the way it should, correct? I mean, you had process, you had case, you had lawyers. That's what people that were on juries decided was right. And for them now to do this, think about what the request is. They have demanded through the process of a grand jury, every piece of paper, I want everybody to understand that, every piece of paper the Office of Attorney General has in its possession that was used in the case against the NRA, and every piece of paper that was used against the case dealing with President Trump and his businesses. Every single. Well, that would be an unprecedented breadth of a request anyway. But if you can have the presidency go against the people who use the courts of law to find him wrong when he was wrong, then they have taken this idea of retribution to places that, as I pointed out before, the authors like George Orwell would have never dreamed in their worst nightmares.
And in the modern day, this happens. We can look for examples in Hungary and Turkey and India where they sort of go after people for things like this to sort of get them out of the political sphere. Back in April, the federal government issued a criminal referral alleging that your client, Letitia James, committed mortgage fraud. Back then, you sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, which included documents and exhibits that you say refute the allegations. But you said something else that was important, warning Bondi against this type of political retribution. So you knew then that the administration was going to double down.
Well, I mean, President Trump campaigned on this. It didn't take him long after getting elected that he created people that would carry this out. I mean, remember his first choice for Attorney General was Matt Gaetz. I mean, if he was signaling what he was going to use the Department of Justice for. You can say a lot of things about what's supposed to happen between those two places on Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House and the Department of Justice, where I started my career. But the separation is supposed to have existed at some level. I don't think there's been an attorney general that has been willing to carry out the president's wrongdoing as much as Pam Bondi has since, I'd say John Mitchell with President Nixon. So this was something he announced, and it's happening as per the game plan he announced. The idea, though, again, back to this idea of doublespeak. The fact that these cases are now being brought, or that he appointed Ed Martin as a special attorney in his department. What's his department called? The Department of Weaponization.
Yeah.
The idea that this department, that is his idea to address the weaponization that he claims was in the past, is now turning into the nuclear bomb of weaponization in the future, is just another example of what I've just been saying as to how the manipulation of language makes your head spin.
In a letter I referenced that you had sent to Pam Bondi in April, you tried leveling with her as a fellow prosecutor. You wrote, quote, "In your position as Florida's 37th Attorney General and now the nation's top prosecutor, you brought or will bring cases as part of your oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and faithfully discharge the duties of the office. When you do so based on probable cause in a criminal case or an initial finding of civil liability, you're not weaponizing. You are carrying out your sworn duty. No one is better than you to recognize that Attorney General James is being targeted for having done the same things in her work, including the case against Mr. Trump and his companies," end quote. Tell me about this. Did you get a response to that?
Well, when we sent the letter, there was deafening silence.
Well, yeah, it's like an opposite day in sixth grade. You know, it's all enemies list. It's all political persecution all the time. I mean, nobody's talking about cracking down on terrorism. Nobody's talking about cracking down on organized crime. Nobody's talking about cracking down on human trafficking, we know. On the contrary, it's all about going after the perceived political enemies of Donald Trump. And they are clearing the FBI of distinguished investigators, law enforcement officers like Brian Driscoll, the one who held the line against an attack on more than 1,000 FBI agents who'd worked on the January 6th prosecution and investigation. And they're using the FBI for blatantly political purposes, like chasing down Texas state legislators who are not even accused of committing a federal crime. It's not a federal offense to leave your state in the United States of America, but they decide because it's part of the political program of the Republican Party that it's fine to use the FBI for that purpose. So it's just one scandal after another. The whole thing is a conflict of interest.
And Congressman, you sent a letter to Pam Bondi and the FBI Director, Kash Patel, about the reports that the FBI was agreeing to help find Texas Democrats. One, have you heard from the FBI director or the FBI in general or the Attorney General or the DOJ? And what do you make of them taking FBI resources, possibly, and going to find folks who, as you said, have committed no federal crimes?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a federal offense to leave your state in the United States of America. Nobody's accusing them of a federal crime, but because they think it's politically convenient for the Republican Party, they want to use the FBI as a national political police under the unilateral direction of the President of the United States and the Attorney General, who is now reporting directly to him. I mean, they've completely destroyed the whole tradition of independent law enforcement in the country, and they've politicized the entire operation, despite all of their promises not to do that. But, those promises were essentially a confession of what their agenda was.
And have you heard from the FBI or the DOJ from your letter?
No, we've heard nothing yet. We've heard nothing at all about any of these efforts to politicize the Department of Justice. I mean, now they're going after Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, because she successfully brought a civil action against Donald Trump for cooking the books and inflating the value of all of his real estate properties in order to engage in bank fraud. He owes $450 million. Well, that was the original sum the court awarded. Now it's well over $500 million for this. And instead of just paying up the money and coming to terms with what he did, they're going after the prosecutor instead.
Well, Congressman, you anticipated my question, because I would love to get your reaction to Pam Bondi tapping Ed Martin. And we talked about Ed Martin in the previous hour and ran down his list of particulars and why he's so problematic. But the Attorney General tapped him as a special attorney to investigate New York State Attorney General Letitia James and Senator Adam Schiff.
So, folks, Trump is already taking a defeat in New York. He's already taken the defeats. Judges have been furious with him there. In fact, the last time he went toe-to-toe with Letitia James, where she wasn't, it wasn't versus her as a person. Like, this is personal. Trump is attacking her personally. But the last time she went on to him, the judge was so furious that he had these big, confrontations with Trump and or his attorneys over comments Trump was making, witnesses, things like that. All of this happened in either that case or the other New York case. And here's the thing, Trump is losing because these sorts of cases make it look very obvious, even to people on the fence, that he's politicizing. 100%. Any argument Trump had that, they were unfair to me and it was all rigged against me and all of that flies out the window when, one, as we've been seeing, you have all these politically motivated firings and forced resignations of prosecutors, of investigators. You saw them in New York fire James Comey's daughter. They argue it's she didn't do her job, but clearly it's motivated by revenge against the family. That's my interpretation, at least. Others might disagree. I guess I could say that's alleged, but it strikes me as politically motivated and vindictive. And so Trump's created a situation where he has called himself, he said this before the election, the revenge, the retributive president. I will be your retribution. And also he was talking about how he was sort of going to settle the score with his political rivals, and that whether that was Biden or other elected Democrats, but also civil servants at the state level, like prosecutors, judges, people who work for prosecutors and judges. Trump has already lost because these battles are not just about what happens in the court, but about the surrounding cases and the surrounding narrative. And in this case, in particular, Trump loses regardless.